Hello, this is 𝗪𝗵𝘁, life enthusiast coach. I decided it might be a good idea to do a review of this last year, of these last 12 months, and perhaps talk a bit about what's happening with us, around us, situation-wise, what have we learned, and so on. The first thing I would like to comment on is that we are now in the Christmas season, and with that, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of socializing. It's already started in my circles. There are office parties, Christmas parties, getting together parties, celebrations, that sort of stuff. I've already talked to people who tell me, well, I'm well behaved most of the year, but this time I indulged. One person tells me, I don't usually drink, but I had a few. Another person told me, stay away from gluten foods, but what am I going to do? So I had some. And it gets really interesting because, of course, when you break the rules, you may have a short-term problem or a long-term problem. I ran into the loss of oral tolerance when I was 55. Until then, I was able to eat gluten foods like wheat without much of a problem. But after that, if I ate anything gluten, my skin would break. I would have visible problems on my face that were clearly the result of the immune system going haywire. So I finally had to admit that I had to let it go. And I remember I'd been buying organic Greek yogurt that I was mixing with some cereal for my breakfast. And my daughter said, you should try 2 weeks without it. And wouldn't you know it, my belly that had been distended, just clearly out there, 4 days later, just flattened out. This inflammation that has been living inside of me because of the yogurt and the cereal just went away. It was as if somebody let the air out of the balloon that I had been carrying inside of my belly, just like that. What I think happens is that when you eat something that's going to break the barrier, and these days pretty much all gluten foods, all wheat will do it, if your immune system is still well enough to repair it overnight or over 2 days, you'll recover fairly quickly as long as you don't repeat it. But some of us, it leaves a hole that lasts 10 days, which means that for the next 10 days after you make the holes, you're going to be experiencing autoimmune effects. And what's interesting is that this effect that people have in their gut is only 1 of 8 people that have actually something going on. So the 7 others will have neurological or other physiological issues. The barrier, leaky gut, there's an equivalency. Leaky gut equals leaky brain. So when you ingest this particular food that's going to break it, cause holes, once you start leaking, it's going to cause all manner of stuff, all manner of symptoms. We have the signal molecule of this inflammatory reaction is histamine. And we have this histamine-mediated health consequence in various bodily systems. Like it can happen in the reproductive system. Women will encounter and experience dysmenorrhea, as in not menstruating, or on the other hand, having very dramatic menstruation, leading up to it, PMS kind of water retention, emotional issues, all balance trouble. So that's just in the reproductive. You can have it in the circulatory. You would have high blood pressure or heart arrhythmias, or something even more dramatic. You may end up with a heart attack, or you can end up with something in the digestive. I've talked to people who all of a sudden are experiencing indigestion, heartburn, or even more dramatic, throwing up, violent throwing up of whatever's going on as a reaction to eating. You can pick almost any system in the body, whether it's the skin, which is what was happening to me, or whether it's the digestive. I did experience heartburn in my day, or you may experience cholesterol, which is the consequence of eating outside of your normal metabolic type. Just recently in our chat line, there was a posting about butter, as in defense of butter. Butter is wonderful. Don't you worry about a thing. Well, that's slightly blinded. Butter has been the fat of choice of the colder climate. colder as in Germany or Sweden or Netherlands, Central Europe, let's just say 45 degrees north, farther away from the equator. I guess you could have the same thing on the southern half of the planet, 45 degrees north and higher in the south side. But the point of that is that butter does okay in colder climates where you can keep it cold. If you can't, then you have to make it into ghee. That's the popular way of dealing with it in India. Ghee is clarified butter. Have removed all the proteins from it, and you're left with just the fat. What's worth mentioning that there are two types of the casein, which is the protein in the cow's milk. And one is associated with the northern cow breeds, like the Holstein and Jersey, and well, the northern ones. And the other ones are associated with the buffalo. In Italian, bufala. Buffalo is the cow in India. And the southern French cow is also the buffalo breed. And they are different, and they behave differently. So it turns out that many people are quite able to tolerate the buffalo milk and don't do too well on the northern milk. And that may have to do with the genetics of the Europeans being the French, Italian, the ones that were using the buffalo breeds, or the ones from India and other warm climates, versus the Danish, German, Dutch, who have had centuries, many generations of using that specific product and the ability to get used to it. So it's important to understand how the genetics work. Of course, in America, we have the melting pot, where a Norwegian grandfather is mating with a Spanish grandmother, and we throw in some North American native Indian, Aboriginal, and whatever else breed that comes into it. Africans imported. There is no pure breed after a few generations in America because it's all melting together. But what we need to understand is that something will have the upper hand. With genetics, there's the gene that is dominant or not, gene that's activated or not. And with that, you need to kind of pay attention what triggers you or what turns your genes on or not, food-wise, right? And so we have these main issues. The number one issue is calories, and these are imported through carbs, fats, and proteins. It's very simple chemistry. If you really look at it from chemical perspective, carbohydrates, they got their name from there being carbon and hydrogen. There really are just the two elements that compose the molecules of carbohydrates, carbon, hydrogen. If you add to it oxygen, you end up with fatty acids or fats. And if you add to that nitrogen, then you end up with proteins. I mean, it's just so simple, unbelievably simple. Fats do not digest the same way as carbohydrates. Proteins can be glycated, converted into carbohydrates. So a protein can become food for a cancer cell. And of course, carbohydrate is the natural feed for a cancer cell. A cancer cell is a cell whose metabolism has been perverted. Normal cell will use carbohydrates and burn it in presence of oxygen, having its output pure energy, ATP, and carbon dioxide and water. Those would be the exhaust of that transmission or transformation. With fermentation, which is the cancer model, which is done in the absence of abundant oxygen, we end up with lactic acid as the end product, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide we get rid of by breathing, exhalation. It's leaving us through our lungs. Lactic acid, not like that. That stays in the body and has to be metabolized through liver, kidneys, urine, all that. And it's way less efficient. This energy conversion is much more efficient in the oxygen burning. You get 34 units of ATP when you do oxidation using presence of oxygen, and you get only 2 units of ATP when you do it through fermentation. So it's exceedingly wasteful, inefficient, and it also has the side, not benefit, damaging effect of having the lactic acid to deal with. So we do want to avoid this. Now, how does this happen? A cell will switch from respiration, the normal method, to fermentation, either in the presence of toxins or in the absence of oxygen, which happens when your bodily fluids are off of the normal balance of the pH.